Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Clarissa Rodriguez, Chair of the New York State Workers' Compensation Board. Today's meeting is being webcast live for members of the public, so welcome, everyone. I now call the 1020th meeting of the full board to order. Madam Secretary, will you please call attendance?
Board Member Foster?
Here.
Board Member Higgins?
Here.
Board Member Logan?
Here.
Board Member Williams?
Here.
Board Member Hall?
Here.
Board Member Osley?
Here.
Board Member Crane?
Here.
Board Member Stasko?
Here.
Board Member Tavares?
Here.
Board Member Caginelli?
Here.
Board Member Delon?
Yeah.
And Board Member Delgado?
Here.
All members are present today.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Okay, agenda item 1, approval of the March 21, 2023 meeting minutes. You have all received a copy of the March meeting minutes for your review. Are there any questions or need for a discussion? Okay, hearing none, may I please have a motion to approve the board's March 2023 meeting minutes?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Mark Stasko, and I move that the March 21st, 2023 board meeting minutes be adopted by the full board.
Thank you, Board Member Stasko. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Lauren Lobin, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Lobin. Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, hearing no opposition, I am also a yes, that motion is passed. Thank you, board members. Agenda item 2, Office of General Counsel, Departmental Report. Now, Acting General Counsel Heather McMaster will present the statistical and informational report for March.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and board members. In March 2023, 19,470 hearings were held, 12,679 cases were resolved at that hearing, and 399 reserved decisions were issued. Adjudication also finalized 1,938 waiver agreements. The Administrative Review Division received 1,149 applications for review, processed 1,020, and there are currently 4,969 applications pending. In Legal Affairs Division, 156 applications for full board review were received, 109 were processed, and there's a current inventory of 226 applications pending.
Thank you. Board members, are there any questions or need for discussion? Okay, seeing and hearing none, may I please have a motion to accept the Office of General Counsel's departmental report?
Madam Chair, this is Board Member Mark Stasko, and I move that the General Counsel departmental report be adopted by the full board.
Thank you, Board Member Stasko. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Lauren Lobin, and I second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Lobin. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing and hearing none. Board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, I am also a yes, that motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item 3, license applications. Senior Attorney Eugene Martin will now present the licensing applications for the last month.
Good morning, Chair Rodriguez, Vice Chair Foster, board members, colleagues, and guests. You have before you the recommendations from the assigned board panel regarding the licensing applications listed in Part 3 of today's agenda. Under Section 24A, Olumwumi Ojugbule, 1 year initial license period. Stephanie Quinn, 3-year renewal. Jay Boardway, 3-year renewal. Under Section 53D, Concord Claims Incorporated, qualifying officer Denise Gold, Esquire, 1 year initial license period. Crown Management LLC, qualifying officer Michael Kudarauskas, Esquire, 3-year renewal. Under Section 53D, Lincoln Life and Annuity Company of New York, qualifying officer Timothy Blum, Esquire, 3-year renewal. Gallagher Bassett Services Incorporated, qualifying officer David Goldsmith, Esquire, 3-year renewal. And finally, AG Risk Management Incorporated, qualifying officer David Goldsmith, Esquire, 3-year renewal. I present these recommendations to the board for your consideration.
Thank you, Eugene. Board members, are there any questions or need for discussion? Okay, seeing or hearing none, may I please have a motion to accept the recommendations of the panels as presented?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Mark Stasko, and I move that the recommendations of the board panel regarding licensing applications be affirmed by the full board.
Thank you, Board Member Stasko. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Lauren Loban, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Loban. Is there any opposition? Okay, hearing none. Board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Hearing no opposition, I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you, board members. Agenda item 4, legal appeals. Heather McMaster will now present the recommendations concerning decisions by the appellate division.
Thank you. With respect to items 4A through 4F, it is the recommendation of the Office of General Counsel to adopt the decisions of the court as the decisions of the board.
Thank you. May I please have a motion to accept the recommendations of the Office of General Counsel?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Mark Stasko, and I move that the recommendations of the Office of General Counsel regarding the appeals be adopted by the full board.
Thank you, Board Member Stasko. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Lauren Loban, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Loban. Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, hearing none. I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you, board members. Agenda item 5, cases for mandatory full board review. We only have one this month, and that's 5A, W&W Steel Erectors LLC, case number G2732874. Is there a motion with respect to 5A on the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Frederick Orsley, and I move that the majority opinion be adopted as the opinion of the full board.
Thank you, Board Member Osley. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Pamela Caginelli, and I second that motion.
Thank you, Board Member Caginelli. Does anyone need to be recused from this matter? Okay. Is there any opposition to the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes? Okay. Thank you. In light of the opposition, I call upon the secretary for a roll call vote.
Board Member Osley.
Yes.
Board Member Caginelli.
Yes.
Board Member Crane.
Yes.
Board Member Delgado.
Yes.
Board Member DeLon.
Yes.
Board Member Higgins.
No.
Board Member Hull.
Yes.
Board Member Loban.
No.
Board Member Stasko.
Yes.
Board Member Tavares.
No.
Board Member Williams.
No.
Vice Chair Foster.
Yes.
And Chair.
Yes.
We have 9 in the affirmative, 4 in negative.
Okay. Thank you. So that motion passes 9-4. Thank you, board members. Agenda item 6, discretionary full board review. I now turn this portion of the agenda over to Vice Chair Foster.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the cases listed in item 6 on your agenda, it's been recommended that full board review be granted. Those cases are 6A, matter of New York Marriott Marquis, and 6B, New York State Arc MSO Inc. I move to refer the cases back to the respective panels for further consideration.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is there a second?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Lauren Loban, and I second the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Loban. Are there any recusals from either of these matters? Okay. Hearing none, is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, hearing no opposition. Board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Hearing none, I am also a yes. That motion is passed. Thank you. Agenda item 7, board members, is there any other business? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our guest speakers today. Lucy Lang, New York State Inspector General, and Brian Richmond, Attorney in Charge. Before we start, I'm going to briefly tell you a little bit about them, starting with Inspector General Lucy Lang. She is a lifelong New Yorker, attorney, and educator. Prior to her appointment to New York State's 11th Inspector General in October 2021, Lang served as director for the Institute for Innovation in Prosecution, a national criminal justice reform think tank. She also served as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan, where she investigated and prosecuted violent crimes, including homicides, gun violence, and domestic abuse, as well as special counsel for policy and projects. Lang brings her long-standing commitment to justice to bear in the office's investigations into corruption, waste, fraud, abuse, and misconduct in state government, as well as deep experience designing and implementing practices that promote institutional integrity, transparency, and accountability. While at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and in collaboration with Columbia University's Center for Justice, Inspector General Lang created Inside Criminal Justice, a first-of-its-kind college class for incarcerated students and prosecutors to study criminal justice together and develop policy proposals to better the system for all involved. This is a national model being replicated by other district attorneys' offices and correctional facilities across the country. Lang has been widely recognized for her work, including receiving the Elizabeth Hurlock Beckman Award from the American Psychological Association in 2020, as an educator who inspires her students in prison to make a difference in their communities. Inspector General Lang is currently Vice Chair of the American Bar Association Criminal Justice Section, a member of the Council on Criminal Justice, and a term member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She has been published in the New York Times, The Atlantic, the New York Daily News, and many others. Lang is the author of March On, a children's book about the 1915 Women's March for Suffrage in New York City, which encourages the next generation of courageous and thoughtful leaders. Inspector General Lang is a graduate of Swarthmore College and Columbia Law School, where she was the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Gender and Law and has served as a lecturer in law. She was appointed to and served on the New York State Bar Association's task forces on racial injustice and police reform in 2020 and 21, and on racism, social equity, and the law in 21 and 22. Thank you for being here, Inspector General Lang. Now on to Attorney in Charge Brian Richmond, who has been before us in the past. Brian Richmond serves as the Attorney in Charge for Workers' Compensation Fraud at the offices of the New York State Inspector General under Inspector General Lucy Lang. In his role, he is dedicated to ensuring that the Inspector General's office is the leader in the fight against prevention and corruption, fraud, and abuse on the New York State workers' compensation system and state government. Mr. Richmond directs and supervises all workers' compensation fraud investigations conducted by the Inspector General throughout New York State and assists in the criminal prosecution of all aspects of suspected fraud in the New York State's workers' compensation system. Mr. Richmond also participates in numerous other cooperative interagency anti-fraud initiatives throughout the state, coordinating efforts with multiple agencies and prosecutors on matters investigated both independently and cooperatively. Mr. Richmond has nearly 20 years of legal experience, including more than a decade in private practice prior to joining the offices of the Inspector General, representing employers, municipalities, insurers, and other insureds in workers' compensation matters and other areas of civil defense litigation. Prior to practicing law, Mr. Richmond was a tax accountant with Big Four accounting firm. Mr. Richmond has presented numerous specialized training courses to both public and private organizations throughout the state of New York in the areas of identifying, investigating, and prosecuting workers' compensation fraud and other revenue crimes. Mr. Richmond has a history of service with his local library, serving for 11 years on the Board of Trustees, including 2 years as its president. A devoted father, Mr. Richmond is raising twin boys with his wife in upstate New York. Welcome, Mr. Richmond. Welcome you go. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and esteemed board members. It really is a privilege to be here with you, especially in person, and to see the efficiency and the transparency with which this board operates, which, as Madam Chair said, are values that we seek to implement and integrate into our practices at the offices of the Inspector General as well. It's a privilege, too, to be joined by my remarkable colleagues. Many of you are familiar with Attorney in Charge Richmond, from whom you'll hear shortly. But I'm also thrilled that joining us today are Managing Investigator for Workers' Compensation Fraud, Jane Seeley, Investigator Jackie Desatel, and our Director of Communication, David Howard King. As you all know, nothing that any of us in state government do is possible without an outstanding team, and I am incredibly lucky as a Workers' Compensation Fraud Inspector General to have just that in my offices. We, like you, really do embrace the values of integrity, transparency, and innovation, and in the 16 or so months since I had the privilege of assuming this office, I have sought to expand the ways in which we engage the public in all of those areas. Since there are some new members here present, what we'd like to do is set forth a little bit about the powers of the offices of the Inspector General, including as Workers' Compensation Fraud IG. And then I've asked Attorney in Charge Richmond to present our 2022 annual report, which we're proud to share with you today, that shares some details about our work over the course of the past year. So as you can see, I serve as the Inspector General, in which capacity I have jurisdiction over the state executive agencies and authorities. I also serve as the Welfare Inspector General, and for our purposes, of course, as Workers' Compensation Fraud Inspector General. Our office across the state is comprised of investigators, auditors, attorneys, forensic accountants, information technology specialists, which is an area that we have really invested in supplementing our investigations over the course of the past year and a half, and investigative aides, and of course operations staff, without whom we all know none of us would be able to accomplish anything. We have a statewide presence. We have offices throughout the state. Our largest office is nearby in Albany. We have an office in Buffalo, Long Island, in New York City, in Suffern, and in Syracuse, and all of these offices have workers' compensation matters before them and have expertise in investigating workers' compensation fraud. Our authority is to investigate violations of the laws and the regulations that pertain to the workers' compensation system, and I am proud of the way in which we have built out an infrastructure and capacity to bring really an interdisciplinary approach to these cases, so that all of the cases, which are all vetted through Attorney in Charge Richmond, have attorneys, people with accounting expertise, auditors, and investigators, many of whom have deep law enforcement training in their background, so that we bring a really a 360-degree approach to every matter that comes before us for investigation. So you'll see in front of you a copy of our 2022 annual report, and I'm pleased to invite Attorney in Charge Richmond to share a little bit about the details of how we operate, the changes that we have implemented in the office over the course of the past 16 months, and what we are hoping to continue doing and scaling in our work with all of you in the coming years. Brian?
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Morning.
So as you can see, just some numbers, a little bit of an overview, if you will. Our numbers vastly increased in 2022 with respect to complaints received, with respect to arrests, and really with respect to fraud uncovered. There was a downturn with respect during the COVID years, but these numbers actually are slightly above, at least with respect to complaints received, above the 2019 numbers. So we're back, and we're back up beyond where we were ever before. In addition to those numbers, WCFIG, Workers' Compensation Fraud Inspector General, investigations led to charges against 16 people this year, 9 of which have resulted in convictions this year. 7 are still pending. It's actually quite a high number that tells you that the district attorneys and our prosecutorial partners are working through the cases, frankly, at a quicker pace than pre-COVID even. Several criminal prosecutions initiated in prior years to 2022 also concluded in 22, resulting in an additional convictions of 6 people, including 2 medical and healthcare providers. In all, during 2022, WCFIG investigations and the corresponding criminal prosecutions, including from prior year arrests that concluded in 22, resulted in just under $5 million in orders of restitution and recovery for the state, for individual insurers, and for other key players in the workers' compensation system. So as the Inspector General mentioned, our authority is broad. It can touch upon investigation of fraud, waste, and abuse with respect to anything involved and administered by the Workers' Compensation Board. That authority enables us under Workers' Compensation Law Section 136 to conduct and supervise investigations both within and outside New York. We certainly have matters where we've had folks that are arrested outside of the state for committing workers' compensation fraud within New York State and involve extradition of those folks from other states. We subpoena witnesses, administer oaths, we take testimony, we compel the production of documents. We are an investigative body, we are not a prosecutorial body, so we do partner with the Attorney General's Office of the state, the U.S. Attorney General's Office, county district attorneys throughout the state, and other appropriate state and federal law enforcement agencies to provide prosecution for these violations. We also have the authority and often do recommend legislative and regulatory changes to aid and combat fraud and fraud issues. So our sources of referral, as you can imagine, are varied and extensive. We certainly have interagency referrals, referrals regarding state employees that coincides with the Inspector General's other hats that she wears with respect to the Office of the Inspector General and the Welfare Inspector General. We get complaints from members of the public, from other law enforcement agencies. We have partnered throughout the years with so many prosecutorial partners that prosecutors look to us as the experts often, and they come to us with cases that they suspect fraud. They ask us to investigate it and frankly give it back to them for prosecution. So we've built some extensive relationships with district attorneys and other prosecutorial partners over the years. We get referrals from insurance carriers, from their SIU units, from third-party administrators, special investigations units. Certainly, the Inspector General has a number of proactive initiatives which generates cases and investigatory necessity. Municipalities, we do get referrals from the Workers' Compensation Board. We've partnered with Heather and her predecessor throughout the years, as well as the Office of Compliance and the Offices of Healthcare Provider Discipline. We assess and review all Section 114A decisions by the board on a monthly basis. So we review those for potential criminality and prosecution. And we have recently started looking at Section 50 decisions as well. Those are the employer, the findings against an employer that there's a compensable claim that the employer is uninsured. So we formed in 2018 a specialized triage unit. And it's something unique to workers' compensation fraud within the Inspector General's office. It's a specialized group of individuals that have either a background or an expertise in both investigating or dealing with workers' compensation matters. That group is headed by me and Managing Investigator Jane Seeley, who's with us today. We review every complaint that comes in. We perform a preliminary investigation as a specialized team before we assess that matter for potentially criminality and assigning a full team. Our full teams generally consist of and are headed by attorneys and include investigators, potentially nurses, auditors, and forensics. Our triage unit has all of those people within it. And in this past year, the Inspector General increased and put additional resources towards the triage unit. So we've grown to 8 members, 8 very strong members. So our 2022 annual report, as I said, we had 16 arrests in 2022, 9 of which have resulted in convictions, 7 are still pending, none thankfully have been dismissed. 10 of those were employer cases, 6 of them were claimant cases, and the arrests from prior year, there were 6 completed prosecutions in 2022. Of those 6 completed arrests, 2 of them were healthcare provider or other professionals. 3 of them were employer cases, and 3 of them were claimant cases, and 1 of them was a claimant case. And as I noted, the $4.9 million in restitution and fines generated from those cases. So the types of cases that we work on, they really kind of fall into three buckets. The first, what I call provider professional fraud. We really used to just call these our problem doctors, if you will. But that category has expanded over the years. We've had stenographers who pad their bills by adding zeros to their bills, home health care aides who are billing for services that aren't provided. Certainly we have conducted investigations of attorneys, and we have a strong investigation right now with the Attorney General with respect to a biller, a medical biller, and diverting bills. Our jurisdiction goes to law judges and insurance professionals as well. We don't have any of those cases currently, but certainly if there was a law judge that we received a complaint about, that would fall under jurisdiction as well. Employer fraud really can run the gamut, but it falls, generally speaking, into two larger categories, and that's those who fail to provide insurance in its entirety under Workers' Compensation 52, and those who maintain insurance coverage, but there's some kind of a premium fraud or premium evasion based upon the numbers that they're reporting. And then there's claimant fraud, which can run the gamut from cashing a dead relative's checks to working while collecting and lying about it, to what I call degree of disability cases, to presenting a claim that's for an injury that occurred outside of the work environment. You can really run the gamut, those cases. So an example of a couple of cases that I'd like to highlight. This is an employer case. There was a construction firm involved in a project at UAlbany, so it was a state project. He was charged with fraud in March of 2022. What makes this case unique is that we had a previous investigation in 2019 against the same firm that wound up with a plea of guilty under Workers' Compensation 52. So Workers' Compensation 52 renders it an A misdemeanor if you fail to provide account for 5 or less employees during a 12-month period, an E felony if you fail to provide account for 6 or more employees during a 12-month period. But it has a special provision which allows you to charge a D felony if you have a previous conviction under Workers' Compensation 52. So this individual actually had a previous conviction under Workers' Compensation 52, so he was charged with a D felony by our office, and he pled guilty this year. So, claimant fraud, we had, as you can imagine, there were a number of COVID cases that occurred throughout the pandemic. One case that I had with investigator Jackie Desertel out in Staten Island, who is here today, involved a COVID case, an employee of a nursing home who filed a report, a positive COVID test, which was legitimate, and then over the course of the following 6 months filed numerous false COVID tests that were manufactured and some false medical notes. He was charged with 23 felony offenses. Those false positive results, if you will, and the forged doctor's note. One of the things that made it most visible, or at least the initial visibility of it, was that they was taking the same sample number with respect to each of those. So it was one blood sample apparently over the course of 6 months that was used, but the notes were fabricated. He was arrested in Staten Island and ultimately pled guilty and had an order of restitution involved. Medical providers and professional cases, there was not a completed prosecution, there were 2 completed prosecutions, but there was not an arrest with respect to a medical provider in 2022. But one notable case that did not involve arrest involved a collaboration with the board. And that is a case concerning a medical provider who orchestrated a scheme to defraud. It was largely the state of New York, although there was others as well. And by falsifying medical prognosis, records of patients, a lot of these were correctional officers, and it kept them out of work for extended periods of time on false or exaggerated workers' compensation benefits. Physician also billed for services that weren't provided or services that were provided by subordinate, frankly, untrained staff while he was out of the country or out of the state. We conducted a lengthy investigation. We presented it for prosecution. It was ultimately declined for prosecution, which did not mark an end to the case with respect to us because we collaborated with the board's health provider discipline unit. We had a few meetings, gave the results of our investigation, and the health provider discipline unit, after I think several conversations with both the council and the individual doctor, was able to have that doctor voluntarily resign his certification. So he's no longer treating workers' compensation patients. This particular doctor has also been referred for discipline with respect to his license. Training outreach this year certainly marks a robust social media presence, one that's just really heretofore not occurred at the Inspector General's office. This includes a series of workers' compensation specifically related videos featuring the Inspector General herself. The year marks also a return, thankfully, to in-person presentations and trainings. I have found certainly, that in-person trainings and presentations are much more profitable, if you will, with respect to referrals and making a connection and really engaging in our mission. So this year, we continue to present at the New York State Department of Corrections Albany Training Academy. That reaches every single new trainee recruit for the Department of Corrections. The Nassau County District Attorney's Office 5th Annual Statewide Labor Conference. We presented several hours with respect to a wide-ranging group of labor participants and prosecutors. The New York Anti-Car Theft NIACT and the National Insurance Crime Bureau, they have a workers' compensation fraud training, which we have for several years presented at. We returned an in-person presentation there, and the Inspector General gave the keynote address at that presentation. The Inspector General also gave the keynote address at NIAC's annual education conference this year, and we were very privileged this year to conduct outreach presentation at the law judge training that was held by the board in Rochester, New York, and Scott. So we also, in addition to our outreach, continued or reinitiated a number of task forces and initiatives this year. We certainly collaborated with all of our district attorneys and prosecutorial partners. We have a continued and renewed collaboration with the New York State Insurance Fund on a number of matters and their division of criminal investigations. We have partnered with multiple offices within the board, including certainly with Heather and with her predecessor. We continue to have a number of matters, including one we were just speaking recently about, which is ongoing and active with the board's health provider discipline unit and with the board's compliance unit. So we have referrals back and forth and multiple collaborative efforts going on at any given time. And they have yielded considerable results last year and will continue to. Our task forces include the Workers' Compensation Task Force. It's a little bit of a misnomer, but it's not really a misnomer, it's just kind of vague. It's a task force involving reduction of fraud and abuse within state agencies and by state employees that our office has been a part of for a number of years. The Northern District of New York Healthcare Fraud Task Force, and then the Joint Task Force on Employee Misclassification and Employer Exploitation. That is a task force that was started years ago with multiple offices within the Department of Labor, with the board's compliance unit, and with our office. That took a pause during COVID and was reinitiated this year. So there's with renewed vigor, and certainly we are extensively involved in that organization and receive a number of cases which we work both independently and collaboratively with those other groups.
Thank you, Attorney in Charge Richmond. So What I learned in my career as a prosecutor is that you really don't uncover or solve crime without talking to people on the street. And to that end, over the past 16 months, I have been to dozens of counties across the state. I have visited all 44 of the state's prisons. I visited the major infrastructure projects over which we had jurisdiction, and have really come to see the extent to which these cases can be very challenging to make, because of course, compared to the sort of matters that I handled as a violent crime prosecutor, where the question was, who committed this crime? Here, so often the question is, was a crime committed? And it can be very difficult to parse because of the subjectivity of some of these issues. But what I have found over the course of these months of traveling the state is I have met so many New Yorkers who have been hurt, who relied on workers' compensation during their and their families' most vulnerable times. And I have learned about people who would abuse the system, costing all of us, undermining the integrity of the system, and of course, ultimately compromising both legitimately hurt workers and uninjured workers who have to pick up the slack. So I am deeply committed to working with you, to collaborating and protecting the integrity of the system. And I really thank you for your partnership up till now and of course going forward. So thank you for your service to New York's workers, for your partnership, and for inviting us to be here with you today. Madam Chair?
Thank you so much. Thank you again for being here and for presenting your annual report and for all the work that you do on behalf of New York State. Board members, may I please have a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Board Member Mark Stasko, and I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Board Member Stasko. Is there a second?
Board Member Lauren Logan, and I second the motion.
Thank you, Board Member Lobin. Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay, hearing no opposition, board members, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No opposition. I am also a yes. That motion passes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.